May 1945, Bavaria, Germany. The war in Europe was nearly over, but the ground reality was still tense, unstable, and filled with the remnants of destruction. American forces had moved deep into German territory, and one of the captured facilities they secured was a civilian hospital that had survived the bombing and ground fighting. The building was large, brick-structured, and still operational. The windows were intact, the corridors still usable, and much of the medical equipment remained functional. Under strict American supervision, the remaining German medical staff had been ordered to continue their work, treating any wounded soldiers brought in regardless of nationality, rank, or condition. In theory, the system was simple: no discrimination, no hesitation, and no exceptions when it came to saving lives. That day, wounded American soldiers began arriving in increasing numbers. Some had been injured in scattered firefights, others in artillery strikes during the final movements of the campaign. Among them was a young soldier whose arrival would quietly trigger an incident that would travel all the way to the highest levels of command. Private James Turner was a 22-year-old African-American soldier from Alabama. He served in the 761 St. Tank Battalion, one of the first black armored units in U.S. military history. They were not given an easy path. At the beginning of their formation, they had been doubted, questioned, and in many cases underestimated. But on the battlefield, they earned a reputation that could not be ignored. The unit became known informally as the Black Panthers, a name that grew out of respect earned under fire rather than official designation. They fought across France, pushed through heavily defended German positions, and were eventually attached to General Patton's Third Army in late 1944. Before entering combat under Patton's command, they received a blunt and direct briefing: their performance would be judged solely on results. Race would not be considered in either direction. What mattered was effectiveness in battle. The unit responded with discipline and determination, proving their capability repeatedly in real combat situations. Turner had been part of that entire campaign. He had seen armored warfare at its most brutal, had survived encounters that many did not, and had carried the burden of constant danger for months without pause. 2 days before arriving at the hospital, Turner had been caught in a German artillery barrage near a small, unnamed town in Bavaria. Shrapnel had struck his leg, causing a deep and serious wound. It was not immediately fatal, but it required urgent surgical attention. Without proper treatment, infection or long-term damage was a real risk. His condition was stable, but time was critical. American medics evacuated him quickly and transported him to the captured German hospital that now functioned under U.S. control. Inside, a mix of American military personnel and German medical staff worked together under strict supervision. Among the German staff was Nurse Greta Schneider, a 38-year-old woman who had spent years working in that same hospital. She was experienced, precise, and professional in her medical duties. She had treated wounded soldiers throughout the war, both military and civilian. However, she also held deeply rooted ideological beliefs shaped by the environment she had lived in for over a decade. These beliefs included racial hierarchy ideas that had been reinforced by propaganda during the Nazi period. When Private Turner was brought into the treatment room, the situation initially followed standard procedure. American officers instructed immediate medical attention. The wound needed cleaning, stabilization, and proper dressing without delay. Turner lay on the examination table, conscious but exhausted, pain evident in his face and body. Nurse Schneider approached, looked at the patient, and then stopped. For a moment, the room remained silent. The American doctor overseeing the case repeated the instruction for treatment. That was when Schneider made her refusal clear. She stated that she would not treat the soldier. At first, the American medical officer, Captain Robert Hayes, assumed there had been a misunderstanding. He asked her again, directly, to confirm what she had said. She repeated it without hesitation. She would not provide treatment. Hayes pressed further, pointing out that the soldier was wounded, that he required immediate care, and that the hospital was now under American authority with clear instructions for equal treatment of all patients. Schneider's response did not change. She explained that it was against her principles to treat him. When asked what that meant, she made it clear that her refusal was based on the soldier's race. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. What had begun as a medical situation had turned into a direct conflict between authority and personal ideology. Captain Hayes made it clear that such refusal was unacceptable under military supervision. He reminded her that she was no longer operating under independent authority and that all personnel were required to treat every wounded soldier without discrimination. Schneider, however, stood firm. She stated that her conscience would not allow her to comply. She did not raise her voice, nor did she appear emotional. Instead, she remained composed but unyielding, insisting that she could not act against what she believed. Realizing the urgency of the situation and unwilling to waste time arguing further, Captain Hayes made a decision. He stepped in and personally treated Private Turner. He cleaned the wound carefully, applied the necessary medical materials, and secured a proper bandage. Throughout the process, Nurse Schneider remained present but did not assist. Once the immediate medical need was addressed, Hayes documented the incident in detail and reported it through the chain of command. The report moved upward from hospital administration to medical leadership, and eventually it reached 3rd Army headquarters. At the top of that command structure was General George S. Patton. When he read the report, he did so more than once. The details were clear, direct, and unacceptable under military occupation standards. Without delay, he ordered transportation and went directly to the hospital. Patton arrived in full uniform, accompanied by officers. His presence was immediate and unmistakable. The atmosphere in the hospital changed the moment he stepped inside. Personnel straightened, conversations stopped, and attention shifted toward him instinctively. He was taken to the nurse responsible for the refusal. Greta Schneider stood at her station when he approached. The confrontation was direct and unfiltered. Patton asked her if she had refused treatment to a wounded American soldier. She confirmed it. He asked why. She responded that it was a matter of principle. Patton pressed further, asking her to define those principles. She explained her beliefs in a restrained but firm manner, indicating that she could not treat someone she considered beneath her based on race. Patton's response was immediate and uncompromising. He made it clear that Germany had been defeated, that its ideology no longer held authority, and that she was now operating under a completely different command structure. He emphasized that the soldiers she refused had fought through Europe, had been wounded in combat, and had still been denied basic medical care inside a facility meant to preserve life. Schneider attempted to defend her position again, stating that she could not violate her conscience. Patton dismissed this argument entirely, making it clear that her personal beliefs had no standing in the current situation. He then presented her with a choice: either continue working as a nurse and treat every patient without exception, or be reassigned to manual labor within the hospital, including cleaning duties. The room remained silent as the weight of the decision became clear. After a tense pause, Schneider ultimately agreed to treat all patients. Patton ensured she stated it clearly and understood the terms fully. She was then instructed to apologize to Private Turner. She went to his room, where he remained under recovery. Standing beside his bed, she offered a brief apology and stated she would provide care if needed. Turner responded calmly, without anger, acknowledging her words with simple courtesy. After that moment, Schneider returned to her duties. From that point forward, she treated all wounded soldiers equally under supervision. Whether her internal beliefs changed is uncertain, but her actions were no longer influenced by them in a professional setting. Private Turner recovered from his injury and later returned to service before eventually going home after the war. The incident remained with him not as anger, but as an example of how deeply prejudice could still exist even in moments where humanity should have been universal. The hospital continued operating under American control for the remainder of the occupation. Standards of equal treatment were enforced strictly, and incidents like this became reminders of the transition from ideology-driven systems to military-imposed order. General Patton never publicly emphasized the event afterward. For him, it was handled, corrected, and resolved within the structure of command. But for those who witnessed it, it remained a clear example of how authority was used to enforce equality in a moment when personal belief systems still struggled to adapt to a changed world.